I can remember one night there were busloads of people who were being transported from the city of New Orleans, and they were going to stop in Port Allen. And the Port Allen sheriff was prepared to open a facility and feed these citizens, but there was nowhere to house them. So we had a plan to get the citizens to a train to move them to another state to be sheltered. However, the drivers of those buses had driven all day, more than 12 hours. They were refusing to go any further, and we just didn't have a solution. It was a night when Mitch Landrieu was working in the Office of Emergency Preparedness with us, and he kept pushing us, and we couldn't do it. We had a little powwow in the cafeteria. Eventually, Mitch came in and he said, okay, how many people in this room, because it was, it was the command center, so you had the various operations, you had military, you had DHH, you had DSS, you had all the departments. How many people in this room can drive a school bus, have a CDL license? And nobody raised their hand. He said, okay, how many people have ever driven a bus before? Nobody raised their hand. He said, okay, how many people think they can drive these buses? And I'm going to be the first one to drive a bus. And Mitch Landrieu and about, I don't know, 6 other, it must have been 6 buses, because 6 volunteers, 6 volunteers went out to Port Allen and drove those buses to get the people to the train to get them out.
27 days after Hurricane Katrina, while families were being scattered and separated, while the local, state, and federal government officials were addressing the growing problems of displacement and human suffering, the unthinkable happened. Hurricane Rita hit the state.
Louisiana has become a learning incubator for the rest of the country, because we learned many lessons from Hurricanes Katrina as well as Rita that other states as well as the federal government can take back, work their plans, and rework the plans, and as we're moving forward with our planning efforts and taking our planning to the next level.
Hurricane Katrina revealed weaknesses in communication, flaws in the chain of command, and mistakes made that resulted in tragedy. But Hurricane Rita brought a confirmation that the state and the nation truly was not prepared.
There was a breakdown in communications in New Orleans, and of course, in all fairness, New Orleans was not prepared for something like that. And quite frankly, the whole country, when something like that happens, initially, they're just not prepared for that. So you just try to just run on instincts and do what you think is the right thing to do, and everybody, again, trying to pull together. And here in Monroe, as the citizens were coming in, we were just pulling together. We had our public safety folks here, and we were pulling together Red Cross. They were setting up, and also Public Works Department. All of our employees was just saying, what do we need to do?
For years after the storms, Louisiana and national leaders try to better prepare and better respond to natural disasters.
I think it's very important before hurricane season gets started, let's get a plan. I think it's very important that when you put a plan in place, you can't put a plan in place when the season is on. You got to get a plan when it's not on. And I think when you get a plan, I think you need to try it and make sure that it's working. And I think the plan needs to be coordinated not just by the local officials, but also with the state officials and the federal officials.
I'm hoping that that would be a cooperative effort in the decision making. And what I mean by that is that there are cooperative agreements that are made. Say, for instance, we had to evacuate from Tallulah to Monroe. There should be some kind of agreement made between the city of Monroe and Tallulah, along with the different vendors that they have out there that would be able to house our people, something of that nature, even if they have to go to the community center or some type of shelter or something. So these things should automatically be in place.
And so in terms of thought process for how do we prepare for it, the place to start that preparation is how are we going to take care of our own people. And so when you start from there, then you can work all the way to, and in so doing, we take care of our business or our agency or our entity. because we take care of our people.
In 2008, the Louisiana Family Recovery Corps warned that human recovery was far from complete, that basic household as well as mental health needs were still not being met. Nearly 1/4 of families were still living outside of New Orleans, in FEMA trailers or in FEMA-paid apartments and hotels. Only 40% of child care centers reopened in the city. The state owed a whopping $2 billion to FEMA.
Well, I think the first thing they would have to do is identify off-site or away from their communities a place where, first of all, they can relocate the living people who survived the hurricane, or actually move and mobilize them to that location prior to the hurricane actually happening. And of course, after it hits, then you need to have places where you know you can get things like cots to sleep on, mattresses, water, generators, things of that nature. In other words, have it stored out of harm's way, so that you know, when these kind of things happen, you first of all have transportation out of that area, and then once you have transportation out of that area, you have the necessary resources to sustain life.
One steadfast lesson learned from the 2005 storms that policymakers and families have agreed on is that individual emergency plans must interlink with the local, city, and state plans in order to better save lives and preserve Louisiana's citizenry.
So as we look at Hurricane Katrina and Rita, we're looking at disaster planning, we're looking at emergency planning, we're looking at post planning, so that we can help communities transition as quickly as possible into new systems where they can have housing, they can have all the amenities, they can have health, their kids can get in school, and they can get back to a sense of hope. What the hurricanes do to you in many instances take your hope away. And we want to be able to restore that hope through developing educational systems. We need to do differently for the downtrodden, the haves and the have, those who have been left out of the system, those who seem to be immobile because of disabilities, who seem to be immobile because of income, will now become a critical part of how we handle them in the Medicare and medical providers, as far as social providers, and also just how do we get them where they need to be? How do we alert them that when something is going on? How do we then mobilize them? What kind of systems do we put in place? If the TV's out, if the radio's out, if the mass transit is not working, what do we do? And I think that we now in a position to do that. The other side of the coin, though, I think that we have to recognize that we have to think as much about where we're going to take them and how we're going to receive them once they get there as we do how we're going to get them out. What we found with these two storms, we didn't do well on getting them out, but we got them out, and then they had nowhere to take them. And so I think new systems have been in place that help us bridge that gap so that we can deal with getting them out, getting them placed, and getting them started again.
Come the lifeguards with another boat and brought us to Poland and St. Claude, and from there they brought us to here.
They still have people in them houses that didn't get out. The water is like 9 or 10 feet high.
I lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. I'm out here in Baton Rouge by myself.
We got in the house, the water started rising more and more to where we went from the first floor to the second floor we had to bust a hole through the roof.